real. Going to talk about that with someone who was an expert school leader and is today in the business of helping other principals. But first, let me introduce myself. I'm Karin Chenoweth, writer in residence at the Icahn Trust and co-author of Getting It Done, Lead Academic Success in Unexpected Schools. With today is Christina Theokas, co-author of Getting It Done and Director of Research here at the Education Trust. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Karin. As many of you know, it is the mission of Ed Trust to improve the academic achievement of all children, but particularly children of color and children who live in poverty. Part of the work here involves finding schools that are doing an especially good job educating children of color and children who live in poverty and learning from them. We are partners with the Wallace Foundation, which has not only supported the key research that establishes the importance of school leadership, but is engaged in a major effort to try to systematically develop the school leaders our schools need. Today, we'll be talking with Jeffrey Litt, who became a bit of a legend in his own time because of his work in transforming the school that came to be called the Mohegan, PS 67 in the Bronx. Good afternoon, Mr. Litt.
Hi, good afternoon.
We're going to talk with Dr. Litt about his experience as principal of Mohegan, but we also want to talk with him about how he used that experience, first founded Icahn Charter Schools, and now in his role as superintendent of the Icahn Charter School Network, where he hires and supervises principals. As we go along, we will reflect on research that can help us put his experience into perspective. At Trust, we always start with the data, so I want to show just a few data slides that demonstrate why we think Mr. Litt is someone worth learning from. The first is a picture of the Icahn Charter School 1 elementary building and the demographics of the school. As you can see, just about all the students are color and most qualify for free lunch. It's just mentioning that admission is by lottery and the application is a very simple contact information application. Because more students apply than there are seats, Icahn Charter Network has opened 5 more schools and has plans for even more. Sticking a moment to Icahn number 1, here is a picture of the middle school, which is catty-corner to the elementary school and next door to the Butler Houses, one of the large housing projects the Bronx is known for. A couple years ago, Ed Trust recognized the work of Icahn Charter School 1 with its Dispelling the Myth Award, and here's why. Here are results for English language arts across grades. The blue bars are Icahn, and the gray bars are for New York State. And you can see that Icahn is performing far above the state in all grades. The results for mathematics also across the grades, and you see the same trend is happening. These make Icahn one of the higher achieving schools in New York, and they are starting to be replicated in the other Icahn Charter Schools.
So we're going to talk to Dr. Litt, I should say Mr. Litt. I want to give you the honorific of doctor, but I know I know that's not quite right. But we're going to be talking to Mr. Litt about his experience at Icahn. But for that, let's talk about what you brought to the experience of Icahn. You've been kind of famous for what you did at the Mohegan. And can you talk about what you brought to PS 67 in the Bronx, and what you found when you got there?
Certainly. I want to thank you first for allowing the time to join you today. The school was formerly known as Public School 67, large pre-K to 6th grade school in the South Bronx in District 12. I fully served as deputy superintendent in the district, and then I left for a few years. And I kept tabs on the district, and I saw that the school was failing. In fact, there were 5 principals and 11 assistant principals in the years preceding my appointment. And people knew me, my colleagues, my friends, all tried to discourage me because they said the school couldn't be turned around. And the more I heard that, the more I wanted to go into the school. The day I began was June 1st, 1988, and that followed the normal interview processes, and I remember the Parent Association president at the time, and why would someone with my background want a school like 67? No matter what answer I gave her, she kept on asking the same question. Then looked across the conference table right into her eyes, and I said, because I believe that your children need me as much as I need them. I believe to this day, and that really sealed the deal. And there was the day I began, and I pulled up in front of the school, and lo and behold, I was surrounded by newspaper reporters and TV reporters with cameras, and I thought, wow, nice reception. And they came over to me and they asked if I had any comment, and I said, well, I look forward to working with the parents and the children and the staff, and they said, no, not that. We want to talk about the shooting. And I said, what shooting? Well, it seems the day before I began, a teacher was shot in the main entrance of the school. Drug dealers were having a dispute, and they started firing, and the teacher was shielding her students, and she took a bullet in the leg. The school was destroyed physically. Most of the classrooms were boarded up with plywood. The library was closed for several years, and it was used to store broken furniture. Bathrooms had little, if any, fixtures in it for the children to use the bathrooms. And the auditorium drapes were set on fire. And it was basically a shell of a school. So I had my work cut out for me, and that summer I spent working on the physical plant. I changed the custodian engineer, got through the red tape, had the school painted, and a lot of work was done in the school. Now that the physical plant was starting to shape up, I started looking at the instructional staff. Historically, teachers were placed there in lieu of an unsatisfactory rating. At the time, that was commonplace in the district. Rather than a principal taking the steps to evaluate a teacher and go through hearings and remove a teacher, they would basically play let's make a deal. I'll give you a satisfactory rating if you'll agree to leave. And ended up going to 67. At the same time, every child with a record of assaults or any improper behavior was put in 67. So now you had a situation that you had unsatisfactory teachers which needed more attention than usual, and somebody somewhere believed that this was going to work. 1 year in the school, I removed all but 6 or 7 teachers. And
I think you get that authority.
The principal has that authority. He has to be committed and determined to use the authority. The role of the principal is a very powerful one if you know how to use it properly. And you have to understand that there are contractual obligations, both on the part of the teachers and on the part of the principal. I have the contract as road signs, as stop signs, as yield signs, as traffic lights. I work within those guidelines, but nowhere does it say that anyone wants an unsatisfactory teacher to remain in the classroom. What it meant was repeated observations, evaluating the teachers, following the guidelines, meeting with them before the observation, meeting with them after the observation, evaluating their lesson plan books, evaluating the progress or lack of progress in the classroom, monitoring their attendance, monitoring their tardiness, monitoring their relationship with peers and parents, and basically sitting in the role of a judge. Committed to the fact that if they weren't good enough for my sons, they weren't good enough for anyone's children. And I never cared too much about protecting myself on a job. And I think that's true for most principals, because it's much easier in a classroom. Once you take that step forward to be a principal, I put in my heart that means you have a vision, you have a goal, and you need to get there through a series of measurable objectives. And the first thing I had to do was change the staff. And I did. And I brought in young, burning belly teachers, many of whom came from Teach for America. I look for intelligence, I look for commitment, I look for people who don't look at my kids and say, well, they're in the South Bronx, well, they come from broken homes, well, they're English language learners, what do you expect? That type of teacher is not good enough to be in my classrooms. So I look for a belief system, I look for a shared vision, and I did the transformation of Mohegan to the staff. I consider myself a drum major, and I've had an incredible band behind me. But it's the role of the principal to determine each member and what they play.
Given the
system run it.
reputation of the school, what were the applicants like for those positions when you were replacing so many of the staff?
Surprisingly, they're very energetic and they wanted to make a difference. And you find that particularly with the Teacher America folk. It's perhaps a temporary point of career that they're not looking to retire as a teacher. Once I hired my first set of teachers, the word kind of spread, and good teachers associate with good teachers. You won't find a good teacher or a great teacher associating with someone who just treats it as a job. So people would recommend people, and I have a whole network of people because I've been around quite a bit. And the word spreads, and everybody wants to be part of a movement, and this was truly a movement.
So you raised the staff, and you were moving forward. What was the next big change that you made at Mohegan?
The funny was nobody knew what to teach. It's full of textbooks that were in sealed boxes. Into every year, the series that was given to schools by the district office. And the day I started, I walked into the principal's office, and there was very little, if any, furniture in there. And I got a phone call from the superintendent at the time telling me that I have to pack up all the readers and all the English language arts materials because he's going to pilot a new program in my school that would be of no cost to me. I said my understanding was that this series would show some improvement and that at least the staff was remaining already went through a considerable amount of professional development. He insisted that the entire series be changed. Approximately a year later, that superintendent, who has since passed away, cited, as were some school board members, because it seems the reason for selecting textbooks was other than their appropriateness for the classroom. And this was the moment that I walked into. Nobody really knew what they were teaching, and I found that teachers who loved social studies would teach social studies every day. Those who didn't love social studies but loved science would teach social studies once a week. And I noticed that fifth grade teachers particularly were teaching completely unrelated units, even though they were in the same grade. So right away I knew the curriculum in the school. There was nothing in the school. The books were inappropriate. There were books. And nobody was directing the instruction in the classroom. Instead, whatever principal was there trying to make a school. And it was like the child putting his finger in the dike. Just another hole just popped up someplace. So instruction played a back seat to everything else. I determined to fix that. And I was invited to a symposium in Manhattan, an organization known as the Center for Educational Innovation. It was then part of Manhattan Institute. And guest speaker was Dr. E.D. Hirsch, and he had the only principal in the country talk about a radical program known as Core Knowledge. And I was thrilled. I was with my superintendent at the time. It was a new superintendent. He invited me to go with him. And throughout the whole symposium, I said, I have to have this program. Received some private funding. I took my Parent Association president and 4 teachers down to see this Core Knowledge program in Fort Myers, Florida, which was not even close to what I was facing in Mohegan. This was a suburban school, all non-minority children driven to school in the station wagons. It was a magnificent building, and the children had touch tanks, and it was just gorgeous, a world that I never worked in. but teachers and I and the PA president felt we could do something with that program. People from the foundation who came to observe my school initially did not want me to pilot the program because it was in its growing stage and they were afraid it wouldn't work in neighborhoods surrounded by abandoned buildings. I was encouraged to just forge ahead. I got some private money again from an institute just to buy some books, and the teachers and I put together what was called the Renaissance Academy. It was 6 classes, spread the grades, and these teachers were going to try core knowledge for the first time. What happened in the school was that word got out whenever you wanted me that I was in the Renaissance Academy. And something very radical. I made grades on the same floor to keep the Renaissance Academy together. Normally you would see the childhood classes on the lower floor, then the middle grades, and then the higher grades. I put them together in a wing of the building so the teachers could share and plan together. And you always found me in the Renaissance Academy. And it came February, the semester teachers in the rest of the school came to my office pleading with me to let them into the Renaissance Academy. We started that year with about 15 classes in the Renaissance Academy, and in the June faculty conference, the entire faculty voted to become a core knowledge school. And I had 11 special ed classes, and they were in core knowledge, and pre-K to 6. It was all core knowledge. And we wrote our own curriculum guide, and it was quite thick, and it was subject by subject, month by month, what we were going to teach our children. And that was really the beginning of a complete renaissance in the entire school.
You knew that your school needed a curriculum, that the teaching was haphazard and sporadic, people teaching what they liked, what they felt good at. When you saw the presentation about core knowledge, what was it about the program that appealed to you and made you think it was right for your students?
Great question. The first thing that I observed when I went around the classes, children had no knowledge of anything outside their immediate community. My kids could not understand the concept that they lived in a borough, which was part of a city, and part of a state, and part of a nation, on a continent. This was all foreign to them. They couldn't name the 5 boroughs. I saw core knowledge, what I called core knowledge, was the great equalizer. My kids did not have exposure to the arts. My kids did not have much way of travel. They didn't go to museums and theaters, and they didn't necessarily come from literature-rich homes. For them to be exposed to this whole world out there, to understand how to navigate the world, I felt they had to be on a level playing field with people who would be accustomed to their normal lives being exposed to these things, and I felt that core knowledge provided this background knowledge for them.
So what was the action of the district? Because you were kind of doing something very different, radically different.
Yeah. A superintendent who brought me down to see the symposium, he was very supportive. Unfortunately, he passed away shortly thereafter, and I was tolerated at best. Felt it strange that here's this school making newspapers, going on television shows, being interviewed by newspaper reporters, and yet the New York City then Board of Education owned the middle manager in what was going on. And that was only after then Dan Rather of CBS National News did a special on us. They said middle manager. And
why were you getting all this attention?
Because everybody believed that my kids in the South Bronx, with all the challenges they face in their daily lives, in a curriculum as rigorous as this, they're studying chemistry in 4th grade, learning about Shakespeare. The garden children were learning what 2nd and 3rd grade children would learn about. And they would talk about the continents in a conversation with you. They would learn about ancient Greece, ancient Rome, man, and the ruler system, and people said, but little kids don't know this information. And it kind of shook people up. What we found was the more attention we got, the further people stayed away from us, insofar as the district administration and leadership at the time of the New York City Board of Education. So seen as a rebel, as a radical. And the Reader's Digest wrote a story about the school, and the title of the story is The Maverick Principal. So people felt, leave him alone, he's doing his thing. And the parents were totally supportive. Everyone was excited. There was a wonderful feeling when you came in the school. It was beautiful. Children's work was displayed. It was rigorous work. It was that there was ongoing assessments. The morale of the staff was sky high. They felt good about what they were doing because they were making a difference.
The website for the New York State Public Schools doesn't show the data from then. But could be seen in test scores. Were test scores going up?
The rigor of the test was not comparable to what you see today. But there's testing. And our test scores did consistently go up. I honestly, it's been quite a while, so I don't remember. They weren't near the level of the Icahn schools. In comparison to where the school was and where the district was, we were going straight up. In fact, I had parents applying to come to our school, even though we had Apollo zone schools. So parents who didn't live near me would get into the school. And an interesting fact is that our superintendent lived in Westchester County, in a small town called Ardsley, with an exceptional school system. And his wife came to observe my school one day, spent the entire day there, and the next week he withdrew his child from the Ardsley school system and a child in Mohegan. So the superintendent of schools put his child in Mohegan. And I think that's a step to the teachers and the people that worked there, that what they were doing was right, despite the odds.
So after 9 years, you left the Mohegan. Why was that?
I was drafted as a citywide mentor. There were three of us, one elementary schools, one was K-8, and one was high schools. Years prior to my departure, I converted school. I didn't want my kids going to the local middle school, which receiving children from 4 or 5 different feeder schools, and it just didn't work. And my kids were not ready to be part of this large group. They weren't street kids anymore. And I worried about their safety, as did their parents, and I worried that the curriculum wasn't challenging enough. So I asked the superintendent if I could begin the steps in converting school from pre-K to 6 to pre-K to 8. And it's kind of interesting. He told me that if the school board would vote yes and allow me to do it, he would support it. So that was very nice of him. And we went through the hearings, and I went through all the paperwork. And it's very interesting. The only questions that were ever asked of me was how much extra it would cost, how many more teachers would it cost, how much more would the payroll be. Nobody asked, do you know anything about middle schools? And so I converted Mohegan to a K-8 school, and my eventual goal was to have a high school. But as I said, I was recruited to mentor principals citywide. I got a 4-year contract to do that in the New York City Board of Education, and I gave workshops to principals around the city, and it wasn't a job for me. And I missed the kids, and I missed the teachers, and I missed the action of a school, and that word got out, and I gave a workshop in Washington Heights and Manhattan, and the superintendent of that district stayed for the workshop and asked to see me afterwards. And he told me to take over a very troubled school. soon heard it was a troubled school there. So I went back into the mix because I desperately missed it. And then 2 years later, he wound up pulling me out to mentor principals in the district. So I was mentoring again, and Governor Pataki signed the charter school law, and Mr. Icahn was very interested in starting a charter school, and my name popped up, and one of the director of his office, and the executive director of his foundation, who's now a trustee of the school, she visited my school, and she interviewed teachers and paras and parents and secretaries and custodial workers to find out who was the guy, Jeff Litt. And I was working as a consultant putting together the charter to apply to the Charter Schools Institute, and I was appointed principal in July of 2001 of our first school.
Now that we've started talking about Icahn, I'm going to start showing some photos of Icahn just to let people know what it looks like. But one of the cores of Icahn is, of course, they are core schools, right?
Yes, all of them.
So when you over P67 or Mohegan, it was a very dysfunctional school, and you talked about some of the steps you took to achieve those exemplary outcomes. Starting Icahn is a very different experience where you're sort of starting from scratch. How did that experience differ, and what did you take to start a school when you had choices yourself, could make all those choices yourself?
Responsibility as a consultant, besides the curriculum and the personnel piece and the school discipline code, I was asked to sketch out and design a building, what I think it should look like. What I was an empty plot of land that had a chain link fence around it with a manicured lawn. We showed various sites as potential homes for the first school. And when I was driven to this piece of property, I had hands on the chain link fence, and I felt this place. And it was almost like it spoke to me. I didn't have a building. I didn't have a staff. I didn't have any materials. And there was nothing that would get a parent or a teacher to say, oh, I want to work there. There was no there. Or I want to send my children there. So what we did was I knew of a contractor way out in New Jersey who used portable units for the Board of Education. And we researched them, and they built this school. It's a prefab school. Basically, it's 22 trailers, and it's put like a Lego set, and there's a brick facade on the outside. And, we prepared the land while this construction was going on in New Jersey, and given a temporary office in Icahn House, which directly across the street, and shelter for homeless women and children. And I read an ad in some college newspapers, and I interviewed some teachers, and I opened up the school. I had to bring in Director of Operations, Rich Santiago. I brought a secretary, a security guard. We opened up just about 4 days before 9/11. So a lot of community speaking. I had to tell the parents what I planned for their children, my history in the neighborhood, because the principal in that district in the late 70s, just about 4 blocks west, and I knew every of the district, and I wanted them to know that I wasn't a stranger coming in with crazy vision that had no basis, that I'm from the community, that all my work has been in this community. And parents started applying. I stuffed every door in the Butler houses and in the Wagner houses by myself. I put notices underneath so that people would apply for the lottery. The manager of the local McDonald's let me stay in this restaurant, and I handed out flyers as people. I was doing whatever was necessary to get people to apply to the school. And then furniture and buying books and providing professional development because it was a very young staff, many of whom just graduated college, most of whom came from out of New York. I had people from Oregon, I had people from Tampa, Florida. This was their first exposure to the inner city and their first time teaching. We put together a pretty nice program. It opened up as K-2, like all our schools do. We had 18 children in the class, classes on a grade. So ended up with 108 children. Small, intimate, everybody knew everybody else. And word spread in the neighborhood that this is the type of school that parents wanted their children in. As
I understand it, Mr. Icahn, who's a very well-known financier, provides the startup money for the capital cost of starting the school, but has insisted that you live within your means, and you, at operating costs, you receive what every other charter school in the city receives, which is less than the per pupil cost of that ordinary schools receive. Is that right?
That's correct. He believes, Mr. Khan's vision is that he needs to be successful because, as he said at the ribbon cutting, if we weren't successful, he would just change the principal. And he want the school to become successful and have people say, sure, if I had Mr. Icahn's money, my school would be successful also. He also believes there's too much waste. We get approximately 70% of what additional school would get. And that's because there's fixed costs that the sending school keeps. Most of it is dependent upon our ability to get grants for the school. We all get, as all schools do, Title I money. There's a direct correlation to the free lunch, the percentage of free lunch that you have. And so between Title I, state and city money, we get $13,500 approximately per child, state and city, and then several $100s for Title I. After that, we have to write proposals for grants. And
so, really, the superintendent of a small district.
Correct.
And you're now, so now you've put in place the core knowledge curriculum, which you find essential. You've put in place certain kinds of structural things. But what do you think about the leadership of your schools? How do you think about hiring? I mean, you've talked a lot about the kind of teachers you're interested in. What kind of leadership are you interested in to run the schools? And even before that, is the school the unit of accountability and change, or is it the district? Which is it?
And we have a very unique way of identifying principals. They're homegrown. Two, I have a principal who runs an outstanding school who hired from my former district. So it wasn't homegrown. There wasn't enough time because her school opened up just a couple of years after Icahn 1 did. And I asked her to join. I wasn't superintendent yet. I was charged with the responsibility of finding a principal as I asked for more schools. And at the time, about 2 years later, she recommended to me a gentleman who was going to replace me because we knew we were going to have more schools, and she wanted me to bring on an assistant principal. The board wanted me to bring on an assistant principal. So this principal, who was a colleague of mine, who opened up Icahn 2, recommended a gentleman to me, and we knew off immediately because he was as radical as I was, just a little less hyper. And I asked him to join my staff. He just retired as a principal. He went as assistant principal. Shortly thereafter, thereafter, he placed me as principal of Icahn 1, and he did an exceptional job, and today he's our deputy superintendent. And he's in that position he began this year, this fall. Other than that, my principals come from the ranks of the school. The process is we don't have assistant principals. We have a principal and a staff developer. We're very big on professional development. It's constant, it's ongoing, it's sustained. A staff developer is a quasi-assistant principal. After serving in that position and being observed and evaluated, they then, if they work out well, elevate to the role of principal because they know our system of assessment, which is very responsible for where we are today. They know our philosophy, our vision. They share our philosophy, and they've proven, history's proven, that they're wonderful principals. So they come from within the organization.
Hearing you talk about sort of growing your own, you know the skills and competencies that you're looking for, and we've got a couple of questions come in from the audience. Sure. And one of the questions I think relates to this, both the leadership and the teachers, and they were wondering to what extent did you seek out educators from the community? It sounds like some of the principals you knew and were actually teaching locally or in other schools within the area. So I guess I think the audience member is really interested in understanding how the schools reflected the community.
We have several teachers in our schools who came from education schools in the neighborhood. For whatever reason, they no longer wish to work for the New York City system. And some of them work walking distance of our school. We have many parents who work in our school. We don't use geography, ethnicity, in the hiring. We look for the best, we look for the brightest, we look for people who will accept no excuses, believe that our children can excel. A lot of people will say, I believe every child can learn. Well, that's true, but a parakeet can learn also. We look for people who believe children can excel, and they have to buy into this philosophy that whatever it takes, we're going to do. It's a lot of hard work. We are because this incredible band that I have behind me. And the principals are leading these shifts and the ones who are hiring the staff. They ask them to give a demonstration lesson. We always check references. We're happy to teach you, but you have it in your heart also. You can't treat this as a civil service job. So they're for the community, and therefore they're getting a job.
It's a shared vision. It's most important, and you're
Correct.
Also looking for skills and competencies, but you talked about professional development being really important, so you can also you're also thinking about growing those skills. Can you talk a little bit about the professional development system you have at Icahn and what that entails?
We never stop learning. We have consultants in every school, whether it be for technology, whether it be for mathematics, English language arts, writing process. We have proven professionals who come from recognized organizations, pay for this service, and they'll come to a school 1 or 2 days a week. They will model lessons. They will observe lessons and give the teachers tips. They work with groups of children. They will give whole group workshops or just grade-by-grade workshops. The principals are proven instructional leaders, and the principals will give workshops. The staff developer will give workshops. It's all the time. There isn't a week that passes. There isn't a workshop to enhance the skills of the teacher. We call lifelong learners.
What are the skills of the principals? Because it seems even the most highly skilled principal still needs help, support, development. What about that?
Every Wednesday, the principals attend what's called an EdStat meeting, and held in my office. A formal meeting, there's a written agenda, there are minutes that follow, and this is the professional development for the principals. Go over everything from requirements on certain issues to how they're working with their assessment results, how they're programming their school to meet the needs of the kids. We'll touch budget issues, generally about 2.5 hours in length. Wednesday, they have the opportunity of sharing something successful. They also have the opportunity to discuss something that's difficult for them, and they're not quite sure if going about it the right way. So now they have this think tank around the table because we have various levels of experience. They also go to workshops, just like the teachers do, and they're also free to attend conferences. They simply have to let me know, and we have to make sure that there's no conflict in their school, nothing critical going on at that particular time that they can afford to be away for the day. But every single Wednesday, it's there, and I get the results. We do a lot of practice testing. I get the results, so I know how every child is doing throughout the school year, and then look to make sure that the children are in attendance for the after-school programs, and that's made it for the kids who need extra help. And I have Saturday Academy program that's also mandated for the kids who need extra help, and that runs from 9 to 12. And the lessons are provided to the teachers. I have all the campuses open. So the third grade classroom in one building is teaching exactly what the third grade classroom, what they're doing in another building, and this is a test preparation program. Have attendance by 9:15 every morning. We call the parents by 9:15 if their children are absent. So the practice test results in English, language arts, and mathematics. I know what kids make the specialized high schools and who passes the high school regions. It's constant monitoring, and the principals are monitoring and following the formula that Icahn 1 developed. In fact, the United States Department of Education gave 7 charter networks a replication grant a few years ago, and Icahn was one of the 7 that got this replication grant. So Icahn 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are replicating step by step the policies and procedures that we put in place in Icahn 1. And in September, I'm opening up Icahn 7, and we'll also follow the policies and procedures.
We invite the audience. We want to invite the audience to write in questions, and we have had a number of people doing that already. We've filtered some through, and we have some more to go that we want to pass on. But before asking those questions, and people feel free to continue to write them in as I talk just for a minute here about the research. I think this conversation has brought to light issues that have been highlighted in research findings, that if we're going to make a change at the scale need that is affecting thousands of schools, not just a few, we're going to need to understand the role of the district in hiring and supporting principals to the heavy lifting of leading academic success. We need to understand the role of principals in Karin and mine's work that were culminated in our book, Getting It Done. And we found that principals of It's Being Done schools held strong beliefs that all children can learn to high levels, and that it's up to the adults in the building to figure out how to teach them. And that sounds very much like what you've been talking about, Mr. Litt. It's the vision and that no excuses, that the kids can learn and we can figure it out. Research sponsored by the Wallace Foundation, conducted over more than a decade, found much the same thing. In a recent publication, the Wallace Foundation distilled what effective principals do in these key areas, and shaping a vision of academic success for all students is first on that list. The next question, of course, is how can we ensure that we get more principals who understand what effective principals do? In the district, as the entity that hires, pays, and supervises principals, the obvious place to look for those answers. Here again, you were telling us about the system that you've developed and replicating something that works consistently, and the Wall Foundation has supported research that has defined key steps that districts can take. Some of those are listed on the slide to the left, including defining standards for principals, training and evaluating, and creating a pipeline to ensure that good leadership exists. And it certainly sounds like that's what you are doing at Icahn. So I had a few more questions come in while I was sort of connecting some of what you were talking about with the research. One of the questions is specifically about core knowledge, knowing that that was integral to your success at Mohegan and you brought that to Icahn. Our audience member wondered, to what extent having a common curriculum makes the professional development more meaningful?
You have RP days, and you have 165 teachers coming for professional development. You can now, because you're all following the same curriculum, we break it up into groups by grade, and the third grade teachers are all getting the same workshop, or the early childhood teachers are getting the same workshop versus middle grade teachers. We know that everybody's on the same page. We know that there's maximum accountability, because as leaders of the schools, we know what's being taught in every class, every subject. No one's going off on tangents. And it's so much easier to train the staff that way or to provide professional development, but more importantly, you can learn from each other. So you'll see teachers sharing. And one of the things that I instituted was that when doing lesson plans, if you love science and math, and I love English language arts and social studies, we both teach third grade. I don't spend Sunday writing lesson plans for all these subjects. You're going to write what your passion is, and I'm going to write mine. I teach your children English arts and social studies. You teach my kids science and math, or we're going to share the lessons, because a lot of schools are experimental schools. We're given that right to try and exchange for maximum accountability. We're not rules-based. So do professional development. We can do whole group. We can do small group, because the teachers are all teaching the same units.
It sounds to me like one of the things you're saying is that having that core curriculum allows for a much deeper collaboration among the teachers and among the principals as well, because there's so much sharing that can happen if everybody's teaching their own thing.
Right, and also it crosses grades, because core knowledge spirals through the grades. You go into more and more depth as the child progresses through the grades. You can have a fifth grade teacher have a discussion with the fourth grade teacher about a given topic, because the fourth grade teacher gave the introduction to that unit. It's kind of like the entire organization is one of collaboration. Everybody's working together. And they're sharing their successes, and they're going to their colleagues for help when they need help.
So a few years ago, New York City approved the adoption of core knowledge by dozens of schools, and the research on that has been very encouraging. On average, the schools that adopted core knowledge did better than their counterparts that did not. And in addition, New York State recently listed core knowledge as a curriculum that was aligned to Common Core standards, and New York City approved core knowledge as early literacy program. And I should note for anyone who is listening that many of the core knowledge materials are open source. They're free of charge. So this is not a commercial plug for anybody to make a lot of money. As an early adopter of core knowledge, is this something, do you see pitfalls in the mass adoption, or is it all good?
Not perfect. And let me say that what I found about the beauty of core knowledge is it's constantly evolving. I have some experience in the field. So we might bump up a topic if you feel in fifth grade that the children need to get the introduction to chemistry earlier than 5th grade so that they can go to more depth in the 5th grade. We'll then discuss that and we modify it. And if we go on their website, your curriculum is aligned to all the 8 standards, and people share their lesson plans there. Use the early literacy program because we have a program that works. Staff has mastered it. History's proven it's successful for our kids in our schools at large, but we follow the curriculum. So literature that the children are exposed to directly out of college. Mathematics, some people would feel that math was never the heart of core knowledge. I think if you had to describe the subject that's most focused in core knowledge, it would be social studies. And everything comes from there. If you can pick social studies as the heart, and everything coming from there is the arteries and the veins. It all feeds into it, whether it's your literature, your math, your science, because the lessons are seamless. You have a topic on a given subject, and the child knows it, they're now in a math lesson and the science lesson, and it's related to that original social studies topic. So you have to pick and choose. Some schools around the country will use core knowledge for some subjects. Some will be complete core knowledge schools. You have to look at it and look at your own school and what your own vision is, and look at your staff and say, which part do I want to adopt?
It also sounds like you've done quite a bit of professional development with your staff where they're making choices and really diving deep into thinking about instruction and what they want to teach. So it's not just a program off the shelf that is being implemented, that there's a lot of professional collaboration and thought and reflection that goes into the instruction.
The teachers own it. In college, we don't focus heavily on methodology. We focus on content. If you want to dress up as George Washington, that's fine as long as you get content across. We're content-driven. So the teachers have a perfect opportunity to be innovative, creative, and use imagination, share with their colleagues, use videos, and so on.
And a couple of questions come in. I think people are wondering about the schools, and this work that you're doing sounds so exemplary, and we clearly saw the achievement is exemplary. People are wondering, are all of the schools in similar kinds of neighborhood as PS 67? Is this with the same students you started out with at the Mohegan?
Absolutely. Most of our children are recipients of free or reduced lunch. Have, if not 199% minority population, and we work with at-risk children in all schools.
One of the questions that came up from the audience is, do you have a cap on class size?
18.
Similar to the public schools surrounding you, the traditional public schools, or is that something that's different?
That's considerably different. When I was in the system, we were in the mid-30s. Today, I think it's commonplace 25, 28 students in a class. We have 18. That was trustees, the executive director of the foundation, who worked with me in the application. She used research, Tennessee class size study. And that study showed that 18 seemed to be that magic number where kids could still get the individual attention that might require. And it worked well for us. Charters have 25 in a class, some have 20. It's how you write your charter. And that number was what we felt was a comfortable number.
There's one other question. We're going to have to wrap up in just a minute, but I think people were wondering about how the content is culturally relevant to the students that you're serving.
College?
Yes, and how you adapted to make sure that it's relevant to the students.
It's not Eurocentric the way cultural literacy, the first name given to it, was back in the late 80s. It's multicultural, and children study, their entire curriculum is multicultural, so they'll learn about every ethnic group. We recognize the ethnic holidays and so on. Eurocentric. We've modified it. You're allowed to do that, and let me just close by saying that core knowledge only represents 50% of what you do in a classroom. The other 50% your local option. For example, the school in Florida had a heavy concentration on marine life, necessarily relative to our kids. So we get into the multicultural aspect there, and every school is free to do that.
So this is Karin again. What I find fascinating is how research intersects with real-life experiences, and what we know from our work as well as from other research is that school principals matter a great deal to the lives of children, particularly poor children and children of color, who aren't always well served by their schools. And I think you demonstrated exactly today how principals can be so crucial to their success. So principals who believe all children can achieve and who work hard to master the knowledge and skill necessary to run schools to help them, they have an outsized effect in helping short-circuit the effects of poverty and discrimination. And I really appreciate the fact that you made that point again and again without our even asking you. So I'm hoping everybody will register for the rest of this webinar series. We're going to have to wrap up because we have 1 hour and we hold tight to that. But I hope everyone will register now for the rest of the webinar series. We're going to be talking next month with Terry Brasheen, the Director of Literacy for Oklahoma. She led a huge improvement in an itty-bitty little district in Oklahoma, and she is now the literacy director for the whole state. She's been asked to do for Oklahoma what she did for Cottonwood. To register for those webinars, go to edtrust.org and look for the box on the left-hand side of the front page. Although Litt was not part of our study, getting it done, he really should have been, and I hope you will. This is a shameless plug for everybody to read our book. And I want to thank the Wallace Foundation for supporting these webinars, which means we're able to offer them free of charge. And we hope that if you're interested in the issue of school and district leadership, that you go to the Wallace Foundation's website where they have a plethora of resources. If you have colleagues who you think should have heard this webinar or you weren't able to listen to the whole thing live, the recording will be available in a couple of days. Watch the website for the list. And finally, we hope you will consider attending the EdTrust 2013 conference. It's a unique opportunity to gather together with educators, policymakers, and advocates who care about improving academics for all children, but particularly children of color and children who live in poverty. It will be in Baltimore, October 24th and 25th, and should be another fantastic conference. Thank you to everyone for attending this webinar, and thank you again, Dr. Litt, for sharing your experience. I know I am always inspired whenever I talk to you, and I hope other people today shared that experience. So thank you again, and we will hope to see you in Baltimore in October.
Thank you
So much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. That does conclude the webinar. You may now disconnect your lines.